Thomas awakens in a dark, metal elevator. Beside him are crates labeled WCKD, and he has no memory of how he arrived there. The elevator starts to move, ascending upwards, until it eventually comes to a stop. A door above Thomas opens, revealing a group of young men and boys, who start to shout and jostle him. Thomas is confused and afraid, and he starts to run, trying to escape the chaos. As he runs, he notices that the surrounding walls are huge and covered in ivy. Eventually, Thomas stops running and realizes he is in a small glade, surrounded by the walls he had seen earlier. The other boys catch up to him and explain that they are all trapped in the glade with no memory of their past or how they got there. Gally, one of the boys, subdues Thomas and prevents him from trying to run into a nearby maze, which is accessible through a door in the wall. The leader of the group, Albie, and his advisor, Newt, explain the situation to Thomas. The boys call themselves Gladers, and every month, a new boy arrives via the elevator carrying supplies. None of them remembers anything about their pasts or why they were sent there, but their names eventually come back to them. Each boy is assigned a different role, and they work together to survive in the glade. The maze that surrounds the glade is their only hope of escape. Every day, a door in the wall opens, and the runners go through it to explore the maze. However, the door closes at night, and if any runners are trapped inside, they will be killed by the Grievers, terrifying creatures that inhabit the maze. Thomas befriends Chuck, a boy who arrived in the glade a month before him. That night, the boys celebrate Thomas's arrival, and Gally challenges him to a fight. They spar, and Thomas hits his head on the ground, regaining some of his memory. Later that night, Thomas has a dream. He sees fleeting images, and a woman's voice says, "Wicked is good." The next day, Albie takes Thomas on a tour of the glade. The boys carve their names on the wall when they arrive, and they cross off the name of anyone who dies. Thomas is given the task of digging up fertilizer from the woods, but he is attacked by Ben, one of the runners. Ben has been stung by a Griever, and the sting has caused him to become violent. The other boys manage to subdue him, but Thomas is shaken by the experience. That night, Thomas has another dream. This time, he sees himself and a girl of similar age sitting across from each other at workstations, going over diagnostics. The dream confuses him even more, and he wonders if he will ever find a way out of the glade. On the following day, Albie ventures into the maze to retrace Ben's steps and discover what occurred. It rains throughout the day, and as it grows late, Albie fails to return. The boys assemble at the entrance to the maze, and just as the doors are about to shut, the lead runner, Miho, brings injured Albie. Thomas races into the maze to assist them, but the door closes behind him. Miho and Thomas utilize vines to elevate Albie's body and protect it from the Grievers. Albie was stung while inside the maze. A Griever emerges and chases Thomas. As Thomas and the Griever run around, the walls of the maze change. Eventually, Thomas lures the Griever between two walls that are converging and makes it get crushed. The following day, Gally calls a meeting of the Gladers. Most are thrilled that Thomas killed a Griever, but another group, led by Gally, believe that the rules were designed to keep everyone safe. While they are talking, the elevator arrives. The boys run out to see what the elevator brought. Inside, they find no supplies, just a young girl who says, "Thomas," before passing out. She holds a note that reads, "She's the last one ever." Gally demands that Thomas be punished since non-runners are not permitted in the maze. He is worried that the girl knew Thomas and that the elevator has not returned since they removed the girl. Some of the boys return to the maze to examine the Griever's remains, which further angers Gally. Inside the Griever, they discover an odd gadget with an electronic display showing the number 7. The device is labeled WCKD. The boys realize that whoever sends them supplies also created the Grievers. Miho shows Thomas a map of the maze. There are various outer sections that open each day as the maze changes. Each outer section is numbered and section 7 was open last night. The girl is now awake and is throwing things at the boys from the top of a tower. Thomas calls up to her, and she agrees to let him come up. He explains that her memory has been wiped, but in a few days, she will recall her name. She already remembers her name, which is Teresa. She also remembers Thomas, and he tells her about his dreams of her and a lady saying, "Wicked is good." When Teresa awoke, she found 2 syringes in her pocket. That night, Thomas is punished by being locked up. Chuck visits him and brings him food, along with a carved statue he made. Even though he doesn't remember his parents, Chuck believes that they remember him and miss him. Thomas returns the statue and assures Chuck that he will be able to give it to his parents himself. The next morning, Thomas and Miho venture into the maze armed with the device they retrieved from the Griever. The device starts to emit clicking noises, leading them to a new section of the maze that Miho has never seen before. He begins to worry as he notices that all the outer sections of the maze appear to be open. They eventually arrive at a wide area marked as WCKD loading dock. This new path leads them to a sewer tunnel with slimy edges, resembling the slime that the Grievers secrete. Upon realizing this, Thomas and Miho decide to retreat to the Glade. Thomas administers one of the syringes he retrieved from the Griever to the still-changing Albie, which ends up healing him. However, he doesn't elaborate further, as the doors to the maze begin to open, and scores of Grievers start pouring out. The brutal Griever attack kills numerous boys and destroys most of the Gladers' village, with Albie among the casualties. Chuck is saved by one of the Gladers, who chops off the Griever's tail. After the attack, Thomas discovers that the venom from the Griever's sting helps victims remember, so he takes the hacked-off tail and stings himself, which triggers some of his memories. Thomas remembers that the maze isn't a prison, it's a test. He visualizes the other boys in incubation tubes, and realizes that he and Teresa were scientists. The Gladers use the second syringe to cure Thomas, who confesses to everyone that he's partially responsible for their situation. Gally is furious, and he and his group tie Thomas and Teresa to stakes outside the entrance to the maze as an offering. However, Thomas is still backed by half of the group, who ultimately manage to free them. Thomas tells Gally that he'd rather die attempting to escape than die in the Glade without trying. He leads a group into the maze, and they make their way to the loading dock area from before, only to be attacked by Grievers once again. They eventually find the sewer tunnel and follow it until they come across a locked door that requires a numerical code to unlock. They realize that the code must be the sequence in which the maze would typically open, and Teresa enters it, allowing them to go through the door. As they make their way through some hallways, they eventually find a door marked as an exit, which leads them to a lab similar to the one in Thomas's memories and dreams. All the scientists in the lab are dead. A video starts playing, and the woman in the video introduces herself as Ava Page. She reveals that there was global devastation caused by something called the Flare, and she was part of a controversial group known as the World Catastrophe Kill Zone Department. As she speaks, guerrilla soldiers suddenly rush in and start killing the other scientists in the lab. Paige tells the kids that she's glad they passed the first test and reminds them that WCKD is good before signing off by shooting herself in the head. In the final moments of the film, the Gladers are finally presented with a way out of the maze. However, before they can make their escape, they are confronted by Gally, who still believes that they belong in the Glade. Gally pulls out a gun and aims it at Thomas, but Chuck jumps in front of the bullet and takes the hit instead. In a rage, Thomas and the other Gladers attack Gally and stab him in the chest with a knife. Suddenly, a group of heavily armed soldiers rush in and take the kids outside to waiting helicopters. As they fly away, the Gladers get a view of the maze and the Glade from above, revealing that they were all part of a much larger destroyed city. In the final shot of the movie, Ava Page is shown wiping fake blood off her head, revealing that her suicide was staged. She reveals that the Gladers were part of a test, and that more kids survived than she had anticipated. The maze was a success, and now, Phase 2 can begin, as the helicopter flies away to the city of ruins. Thanks for watching. Which movie should we recap next? Comment your ideas down below. See you soon.